At Gen Con 2023, we interviewed Aaron Shanks, Director of Marketing for Paizo. We discussed Pathfinder 2nd Edition release, as well as their plans for the new Starfinder 2nd Edition. We also delved into Paizo's approach to world building with system-wide events that progress the story in both games, and touch upon Orc, the new open game license spearheaded by Paizo. Listen along and enjoy. What does the future hold for Paizo? What products you have coming out? Maybe just announced?
Sure. All right,
That's a
here we
leading
go.
question for
yeah.
you.
So the big two games that we offer are Pathfinder and Starfinder. Pathfinder is a high fantasy role-playing game with elves and dwarves and magic and swords and sorcery. Starfinder is a spin-off game of that. It's science fantasy based. It's got elves and dwarves and dragons, but also aliens and starships and space stations. So as just a frame of reference, those are the two products that we have. The big new releases for the Pathfinder role-playing game at Gen Con are Rage of Elements. Rage of Elements is one of our rule books, all about not just the four elements of fire, air, earth, and water, but we've added metal and wood, which are classical elements from Asian cultures.
Okay.
And so we now have those 6 elements in our rule book, allowing you to, because we have characters that can come from our pseudo-Western Europe, and we are diving into our fantasy Asia called Tian Cha. So it lays the groundwork for people to be able to play a lot of different characters, and those characters might not come from cultures that tap into all 6 elements. Maybe it's just 4, or maybe it's 5, but now with this book you got access to all 6. And that has to do with our setting of the Lost Omens, but it's also really great for any homebrewer who wants to create their own setting or bring all 6 of these elements to their own setting. So, and the really great thing about that is while it has content for GMs with monsters and treasure, it has new player features, new feats, new spells, but it has a new class, and the new class is called the Kineticist, and that Kineticist will manipulate any, from 1 to 6 of those elements, blast people with fire all day long, or maybe use the element of air to do more mobility-themed powers, or the wood. The wood element has a lot to do with vitality and temporary hit points and healing, so that while it's one class, depending on the element or combination of elements you choose, you can do a lot. So we think players are, and you can add it to the your existing characters to give them all, like maybe you're playing a fighter, but you're gonna give it some metal themed elements, or maybe you're playing a cleric, but you want to give it some wood themed elements, or so it's gonna mix and match very well.
Cool.
So that's really the big product here. The secondary Pathfinder hardcover that we've just released at the end of June is High Helm. Now,
Okay.
High Helm, Lost Omens High Helm, that's our setting line. So while the rule books are 80% rules, 20% lore, the Lost Omens books are 80% lore, 20% rules or crunch.
Gotcha.
So you can mix and match depending on what you like. So I would say the High Helm is great because it's all about dwarves.
Okay.
High Helm is a mountain citadel called it's in the middle of our northern continent. It's a huge inside a mountain, multiple levels with a huge spiral staircase ramp sort of thing connecting them all, and then at the bottom you've got the Darklands filled with scary monsters.
Cool.
And so that is a setting and a location that you can explore, and by doing so really flesh out dwarven characters. But our setting and our world is very cosmopolitan, so it's going to be a place where your elves and your humans and your goblins can all come visit, and that segues into our newest adventure path, which is called Sky King's Tomb, which is a dwarf themed quest that starts at High Helm, but then goes into the Darklands looking for some of those lost dwarven artifact treasures of
as one does,
kings of the past.
Yes.
So people who look at our adventure paths will find that we kind of alternate back and forth between sometimes things that are very quirky, like we have a circus-themed adventure path, and others that are very traditional. And this would definitely be one of those traditional. Adventure paths. It doesn't stop people from playing very quirky characters, or traditional characters, but that's what this one is. And so that'll be levels 1 through 10. We'll be releasing it over the course of 3 months, and then we're going to launch into Tian Sha, that Asian continent I was telling you about, with 4 adventures that are set in that land. Season of Ghosts. I'll probably stop there, but just because we've lined up these adventure paths for months to come, right?
Sure.
Right.
So that's what Pathfinder has in store in the short term.
Mm-hmm. Sounds cool. I gotta say, one of our themes on our podcast is beg, borrowing, and stealing from other games and other settings and other rules and what have you. And the Forge of the Elements, I'm currently running an elemental apocalypse game set in what happens if the Temple of Elemental Evil rose and never fell.
Right.
So terrible things are happening, and that book looks awesome.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of mayhem in that.
It's powered by that other game system, but
sure.
it could very easily. I think it would be very easy to adapt ideas and
the really great plot hook in Rage of Elements is that like that other game system, we have a tradition of some evil elemental rulers and some good elemental rulers.
Okay.
In our case, they're actual deities. We've got evil earth gods and evil fire gods, elemental lords, if you will, and in our game, they've had the good elemental gods imprisoned for the history of Pathfinder First Edition.
Oh, okay. I was not aware of that.
Right? So it's been the elemental planes in Pathfinder have been sort of dominated by the bad guys for quite some time. But in Pathfinder Society years ago, we wrote a quest so that the actual players in our living campaign went and freed one of the good elemental lords.
Nice.
They succeeded. It happened in our canon.
Very
and
cool.
so what we have decided in this Rage of Elements book that's been released, and this is part of that 20% lore that I talked about, is that now all the good ones have been freed. We managed to free all the good gods of fire, air, earth, and water.
Okay.
Conflict is likely to ensue.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And that's the explanation for why the lost planes of metal and wood have decided to come back. The rulers of those lands are not really separated by good and evil as much. So they just sort of took their planes and went home.
Yeah.
Like thousands and thousands of years ago, so long ago that everybody's largely forgotten about them. But now they're back. And so it really brings a fresh take to the elemental planes. Like, you can find the things that you're used to finding, but we've added a little spice to it. So we think that'll be
cool.
We think that'll be fun.
Cool.
So Big Borrower is still that, if you will. And certainly we can say that we're taking an inspiration not only from Western myths but Eastern myths as well. We're really trying to broaden what we're doing as a tabletop role-playing game company. We have Pathfinder First Edition was, for a decade or more, really rooted in Western mythology.
Right.
And we would talk about fantasy Africa, or we would talk about fantasy Asia. But oftentimes we'd write about it from the perspective of someone who'd never been there. But now what we're doing is we're rewriting these books. We're representing these areas. First of all, in a book we released a couple of years ago called Mwangi Expanse, where we hired people who were actually have some knowledge of African myth and culture to be able to write about these locations from the perspective of someone who might live there.
Very cool.
And so we're doing the same thing with our Tian Sha and our Asia. So hopefully people will find that exciting and new for some folks. So that's where we're at with Pathfinder, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we're going to playtest 2 new classes.
Okay.
We announced that just yesterday morning. We traditionally start a class playtest in late summer, early autumn.
Okay.
So this time last year we playtested the Kineticist, and here you find it in the rulebook this year.
Okay.
So we're playtesting 2 new classes in just a couple of months, and that will be free for everyone to go to pathfinderplaytest.com and download a free PDF and find out how to get involved and give us feedback on those 2 new classes that we have planned, and find out what you might want to beg, borrow, or steal, and put that into your game. And then probably see those 2 new classes sometime next year.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, my players have never met Adventure Path they didn't want to go off of, so...
Coloring outside of the lines, absolutely. And I guess also of note, we've decided to have an earth-shaking world event in Pathfinder. Next year, we've announced that one of our core 20 deities will be killed.
Oh.
And there will be a novel that we will publish that details that situation. And we used to be involved in a line of products called Pathfinder Tales years ago.
Yes.
Published a lot of soft cover novels. That industry is a little challenging, and so we took a step back and haven't been publishing anything recently. But with this new book next year, we're stepping back in.
Cool,
It'll be tied to our big Death of a God, and a lot of new books and adventures associated with that. And those 2 new classes that we're playtesting kind of have a relationship to that a meta event, as you would maybe name it in comic book land. You'd call it a summer crossover event, right?
Gotcha. So Starfinder.
Yeah. So Starfinder is our science fantasy game. We just finished the Drift Crisis meta event in Starfinder, in which our hyperspace is called the Drift. It crashed. And so for the last year, we've been sharing adventures and rule books that have to do with that event, and adventures that fix it. Well, now, a year later, according to our canon, it's fixed, and there's a new normal in which there are these hyperspace lanes, these drift lanes, that get you from one location to another faster.
Okay.
So we have a new book called Ports of Call, a new hardcover Starfinder rulebook named Ports of Call that detail 10 of these locations that are sort of on the drift lanes, so that you really get an in-depth lore perspective as to these locations. And also, it's just super cool that this rulebook has a map of our galaxy. We had never really talked about where this is located to that, and where things are in the galaxy. We left it kind of ambiguous and nebulous, but we've actually put dots on a piece of paper now and said, this is, you are here.
Gotcha.
So that's fun. It's a big map in the back of the book, and little lines to show where those hyperspace lanes are. And so that's available now. We have one more Starfinder hardcover rulebook that we're releasing next November. But no,
This
that one's
November or
October. That one's October. Pardon me. This October.
Okay.
And that is Starfinder Enhanced. It is going to be our final Starfinder First Edition rulebook.
Okay.
And it will give all the classes a ton of new player abilities, feats, options, but also go back and spit and polish and tweak a few of the other classes that over the years we've seen underperforming. Sounds so judgmental, but rather, there are some classes that are just like, the operative in Starfinder is like our rogue, and everybody's like, that class just kicks butt. It's the one to play. So rather than nerf that one and bring the power down on that one, we're bringing the power up on the rest.
Gotcha.
To make them more even and evenly balanced. So I think that's going to be a really great capstone to Starfinder First Edition.
Sounds like it.
Because we've announced, as of yesterday, we announced Starfinder Second Edition. So we will be, and that's 2 years out. So we're giving people lots of notice. You can still really enjoy your Starfinder First Edition games for the foreseeable future. But we are going to publish a Starfinder Second Edition series of books that are fully compatible with Pathfinder Second Edition, so that when you learn one rule set, you know the basic rules to both. Because
Okay.
right now the two rules where the games are separated by several years, and the design space between the two of them is different, and so you just didn't. If you learned how to play Pathfinder Second Edition, you wouldn't necessarily understand how to play Starfinder. But our Pathfinder Second Edition has proved to be very popular and successful, and everybody loves the Starfinder setting and lore. So we're going to blend them, and we'll play test it with our community to make sure we're doing it right over the course of the next 2 years. And I think we're really excited about that and the feedback we've gotten from. I mean, there's always a little bit of mourning anytime you announce you're going to wrap up one edition, but really it's been. Starfinder First Edition was launched in, I believe it was 2016 at Gen Con. Maybe it was 17. I wasn't
Sounds
there.
about right.
My first Gen Con was 2018.
Okay.
And so it was either 17 or 16 that Starfinder was launched, and so 2 years from now it'll have had a good run.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to implementing all the things we've learned.
I was going to say, so
Yeah.
are there some particular things that you could talk about that you would anticipate showing up in
Yeah.
Starfinder 2?
I mean, I know. Species that fly are very prevalent in Starfinder, but not so much in Pathfinder. So we'll make sure that works and continues to work in Starfinder.
Okay.
Starfinder has what we like to call a cantina feel,
Okay.
referencing another intellectual
Yes,
property,
yes.
where there's just a lot of aliens.
Yes.
And with Starfinder, we know that's a part of the setting, and we need to make sure that there's a lot of aliens that you not only, maybe you'll fight them, maybe you'll meet them as NPCs, but maybe you want to play them. And so that'll be important in Starfinder. So flight, a diversity of aliens, and we're going to move the setting up a few years. In theory, in Pathfinder and Starfinder, the idea is that for every year that passes in the real world, the setting a year passes in the setting as well. So we'll have some setting updates in which the adventures from First Edition have occurred with climactic endings that are part of the canon.
Cool.
And you can
Cool.
read about in Starfinder Second Edition.
Gotcha.
And what else are we really exciting? The classes that exist in Pathfinder Second Edition, you should be able to pull into Starfinder. So you can play a cleric or a druid or a fighter or an inventor or an investigator. There are classes within Pathfinder Second Edition that are really unusual concepts that can be carried forward into in science fantasy, I think, in a really interesting way.
Yeah, I don't know much about the kineticist, but
Right.
it sounds
Oh.
like one that would move over to.
I think it would move over to
Starfinder.
Starfinder really well. We have something called the Psychic, right? Which could be used in either of those settings.
Right.
So it's gonna instantly create a lot of options for play, and we're really excited about that.
Cool. Very cool. Interoperability sounds very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when Starfinder was first coming out, it was kind of called Pathfinder 1.5 because you were
Yes.
trying out new rule stuff, and then Pathfinder 2.0 comes.
You can see it. There are
and
things
then-
that we dabbled with.
Yeah, it's nice to see that
Yeah.
sort of trend continuing. Not like throwing away everything, but
Yeah.
trying to improve upon what's there to make your next system.
Yeah. So do you have time for another question?
Oh, sure.
Orc.
Oh, yeah.
So,
The Open Gaming license was the license we had been using. And Orc is the open open roleplay creative license. There we go. It doesn't roll off my tongue quite yet.
Right.
so what do you see? So, I mean, we paid attention to the kerfluffle
Sure.
when it
Yeah.
happened
Yeah.
a couple
We'll call
months
it that.
ago.
Sure.
We'll call it the kerfluffle, the capital K.
Yeah.
So, what would you say are lessons learned from the kerfluffle that you try to apply to Orc?
Well, really, it's about standing on our own 2 feet, recommitting to the idea of open gaming, where the rules that we use are free and open to everyone, and that we think that's a really great business strategy because it lowers barriers to entry and friction in learning the game. And then people can just get on board, buying the products full of great art and putting our energy into a great setting and amazing lore and art, and really having something that is it's making lemonade out of lemons for us, because we're very much making sure that all of the setting and all of our lore and all of our rules are our own intellectual property, and that we stand on our own 2 feet. Certainly, the open gaming license still exists, and you'll find it in our books. We're continuing to use it in some of our books. It's not like it's off the table. We are managing